Climate change protesters blocked traffic in Washington, D.C. this morning in an effort to shut down the city. The rally was planned by the coalition to shut down D.C. as part of the global climate strikes that have been going on since Friday. So far, at least 26 people have been arrested. It all comes as the United Nations hosts its landmark Climate Action Summit today. More than 60 world leaders have gathered in New York City to address the climate crisis. President Trump did drop by for the meeting. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres opened the summit with an important message.
Nature is angry, and we fool ourselves if we think we can fool nature, because nature always strikes back, and around the world, nature is striking back with fury.
And Christiana Figueres joins me now. She led the original negotiations of the Paris Agreement when she served as executive secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. She's now founding partner of Global Optimism. Christiana, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. Now, the U.S. is expected to formally pull out of the Paris Agreement in November of next year. But doesn't that depend on whether or not Donald Trump is reelected? If there's a Democrat in the White House, we will likely stay in the Paris Accord. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, no, not really, because the United States can legally pull out on the 6th of November of 2020. So no matter what the result of the election is just a few days before, Donald Trump will still be in the White House. Of course, if we have a Democratic president, then as soon as the Democratic president takes control of the White House, then I think we will see a very quick switch back into the Paris Agreement. The important thing here, I think, to remember is that that dovetailing of the United States back into international efforts is actually already being prepared by 70% of the economy of the United States that continues to decarbonize independently of what they're hearing from the White House, because they understand that it is in their interest. So the preparation for re-entry is already there.
So you think the impact of this administration, which we know has not been necessarily environmentally friendly in the eyes of climate change activists, you think that the impact of this administration can be undone then?
Well, of course, it depends on whether that is one administration or two. I think that it will require a focused effort to catch up with the rest of the world and become as competitive as the rest of the world is already becoming in decarbonized export of products and services, but much easier done after 4 years of irresponsibility than after 8 years.
So we have seen a trend, Christiana, of companies pledging to do their part to reduce carbon emissions, as you just mentioned, sort of apart from government regulation. So do you think companies can have a greater impact than the government?
Well, the fact is that we need both, or rather we need three. We need certainly central governments. We need all of the other levels of government, city and states as well, which is what is happening in the United States. And we need corporations and finance institutions to do their part from the private sector, both on the corporate as well as on the private finance. So we need everyone to collaborate now and to increase their efforts, because we have run out of time.
Right.
If we had started this effort 30 years ago, we could probably depend on one or the other to take the lead. But at this point, all hands on deck.
There has been a shift recently, or sort of an emphasis on moving the responsibility from the individual, from the consumer, onto the companies and the governments. In other words, when I go into a Starbucks, I don't want to have to be the one to decide whether or not to use a straw. I shouldn't even be offered the straw. So the onus on the individual needs to shift to a larger entity. Would you agree with that?
No, I would say the onus is on each one of us. So your contribution is when you walk into a restaurant or a Starbucks and you are offered the plastic straw, to turn it back. Ask for the manager and say, you know what, from now on, please don't offer me a straw. Because the fact is, consumers, citizens, have a huge role to play. Ultimately, companies produce what customers want and what they will buy. So there is no exemption here from responsibility. We are all co-responsible.
So you want to see it on three levels: the individual, companies, and the government. All right. So, Christiana, take us inside the room today. What will be discussed at the UN during this summit, and should people expect anything concrete to come out of it?
Well, I think we already have concrete results. The first concrete result is that the Secretary General delivered a very, very clear message about what the global responsibility here is toward the future. And then, as you have on the screen, he invited 3 young people, including Greta, to address the representatives of the governments. And Greta, in her usual style, delivered a scathing speech about the irresponsibility with which we have been non-acting, and was very, very clear about if we do not do our job, she and her generation will not forgive us. So just swallow that one for a moment. Now, she was followed by the Prime Minister of India, Prime Minister Modi, who doubled publicly now his intent to install renewable energy, doubled also by Chancellor Merkel, who doubled the finance that Germany is going to put in, was followed by an announcement of the largest asset owners of the world about how they are going to, how they have already committed actually to having all of their portfolios companies get in line with the decarbonization that we need of 1.5 degrees by 2050, and on and on. So we do have a whole day of platform time for everyone to come up to the plate and be very public in their commitments about how we have to improve and increase both scale and speed.
So, it is estimated that 80% of America's energy comes from fossil fuels. Renewable energy makes up only 11%. So how can the U.S. narrow that margin in a reasonable way without suffering significant job losses for those who work in the fossil fuel industries?
Well, the fact is that there are very few people. Let's take coal to start with, because coal is the major problem here.
Right.
And there are very few people working in coal in the United States, not because of climate change, but actually because of automation in coal, and also because natural gas has displaced coal over the past few years, gas being so much cheaper than coal. So you already have a wave of energy transformation that is taking us from the very, very intensive, carbon-intensive coal onto natural gas, and that wave will continue, that transformative wave, and we will be moving over to renewable energy. The fact is that the fastest growing job in the United States today is actually wind power engineering and maintenance, because that is the fastest growing energy sector. Right. And of course, it starts small because it starts from zero, but it is escalating quite quickly in an exponential fashion in the United States and elsewhere.
Right. Now, I just want to ask you finally, you participated in the march on Friday in New York City where thousands showed up, millions more rallied around the world. I mean, it seems pretty clear that popular engagement or popular sentiment is on the side of fighting climate change. So why are the results so dismal at this point? And also, are you more optimistic now than you were in 2015?
Well, the results are, you call them dismal. What I would say is the results have been way too gradual and too slow. We are definitely moving in the right direction. The global economy is becoming decarbonized, but way too slowly. And that is why I'm actually quite grateful for the anger and the outrage that is out there in the streets, because I think that is going to jolt everyone. And the demand there is for more speed, more responsibility, more scale. And I think that's actually a very important contribution, particularly because we are running out of time.
All right. Well, Christiana Figueres, we thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.